Lyra had always known she was different. Born blind in a small village at the edge of Eldoria, she moved through life in a world painted not in colors, but in sounds, scents, textures, and subtle vibrations that others never noticed. To the villagers, she was fragile, delicate, someone to pity or protect. To Lyra, this was the world's mistake. She had learned early that the absence of sight did not mean the absence of perception. Every creak in a floorboard, every rustle in the trees, every shift in air currents carried meaning, warnings, whispers, invitations. Her world was alive in ways that sighted people could not imagine. She lived with her grandmother in a small thatched cottage just at the edge of the forest. The walls smelled of herbs, lavender, rosemary, sage, and of the warmth that only a lifetime of love could produce. Every morning, Lyra's grandmother, a gentle woman with hands as worn as the earth itself, would awaken her with soft words and the smell of freshly baked bread. Lyra would stretch, feeling the rough texture of the floorboards beneath her fingers, and take a moment to listen. The distant crow of a rooster, the faint chatter of villagers, the gentle wind through the forest. It was a life that seemed ordinary, uneventful, and yet Lyra had always known she was meant for more. There were moments when she felt it, a tingle along her spine, a vibration under her feet that seemed to call her toward the unknown. Most villagers dismissed it as childish imagination, but Lyra trusted it. She trusted herself. On the evening of her 17th birthday, something extraordinary stirred in the air. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a velvet sky heavy with stars. Lyra walked through the familiar forest path, her cane tapping rhythmically on the mossy ground, each step measured, precise. Normally, she collected herbs or simply wandered for pleasure, feeling the heartbeat of the forest. But tonight, there was something different, a pull, subtle yet insistent, drawing her deeper into the woods, urging her deeper into the trees than she had ever dared to go. She paused, sensing the shift in the air. A chill ran down her spine, though the night was warm. There was a vibration in the ground that set her heart racing, a presence that hummed with restrained power. Lyra closed her eyes and inhaled, taking in the earthy scent of wet leaves, the faint tang of stone, and something else. Something ancient, something forgotten. Her curiosity overcame caution. With careful steps, she followed the sensation, feeling the uneven terrain beneath her feet, brushing past the rough bark of trees and the soft caress of low-hanging vines. Each step brought her closer to the source, and the hum grew louder, pulsing in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She could not explain why, but she knew she was walking toward someone or something that needed her. The forest grew dense, shadows thickening with every step. The sounds of nocturnal creatures whispered around her, their calls blending with the heartbeat she now felt pulsing through the earth itself. Then she sensed it, a presence unlike any other. It was massive, powerful, yet restrained, bound, suffering. The sheer force of it made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Lyra stopped, listening, trying to discern the exact nature of the presence. She could feel it pressing against her, and her intuition whispered a warning. "This is no ordinary danger," it said. "And yet, you are meant to be here." Her hands brushed against the vines hanging in front of her, and she realized they were hiding something. A cave, its entrance obscured by nature's overgrowth. The metallic scent of old chains reached her nose. She froze, heart pounding in her chest. Chains. Someone or something trapped behind them. A tremor of fear threatened to overtake her, but Lyra's curiosity, her sense of destiny, was stronger. She stepped forward, feeling the uneven rocks beneath her feet, each step careful, measured. The air grew heavier, charged with a strange energy that seemed almost alive. The hum in her mind grew louder, resonating with her heartbeat. She felt a hand, or perhaps a presence, reach out to hers, urging her onward. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Silence answered, thick and suffocating. Then a sound, soft, deliberate, metallic. A chain rattled. A breath caught in her throat. Her hands instinctively reached for the walls of the cave, guiding herself by texture, by memory, by instinct. And then she heard it. A voice, low, gravelly, impossibly deep. "Who are you?" Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The voice carried power, authority, centuries of pain. Yet there was also something fragile in it, a quiet desperation. She swallowed, trying to steady her voice. I think I can help you." The response was almost a whisper, heavy with disbelief and hope. You can?" "Yes," she said. "I don't know how yet, but I can feel it. You're trapped. I can help you." A long silence followed, then a shuffling sound. Something shifted in the shadows. Lyra's pulse quickened, but she did not move back. The cave floor was cold beneath her bare feet, the air thick with a scent of iron and old stone. And then she felt it. Chains, binding a presence of unimaginable power. They were not just physical chains. They were enchanted, layered with a magic she had never felt before, suppressing the strength of the being within. Lyra reached out her hands, fingertips grazing the cold metal, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down. It was overwhelming, yet she did not retreat. There was a rhythm to the chains, a pulse that she could follow, and she realized with a shock that it was alive. Not just the chains, but the being bound within them. "I am Auric," the voice said finally, the name resonating like distant thunder. "No one has come near me for decades. How? How did you find me?" Lyra swallowed. "I don't know. I just felt you needed me." There was a pause, then a soft, almost imperceptible sigh. "No one has ever spoken to me like that. No one has felt me truly." Lyra's heart thudded in her chest. She did not yet understand what she had discovered, nor the immense power restrained behind those chains. All she knew was that she could feel him, sense him, and that the world she had known, the ordinary, quiet life of Aldoria, was over. Something far greater had found her, and it had chosen her for a purpose that would test everything she thought she knew about herself. For the first time, Lyra understood that her ordinary life had only been preparation. The true journey, the one that would challenge her courage, her intuition, and her heart, was about to begin. And she was ready. The cave breathed like a living creature, slow, heavy, ancient. Lyra stepped deeper into the darkness, the rough stone beneath her fingers guiding her, while the thick metallic scent of old magic wrapped around her like a shroud. Every instinct screamed for her to turn back, to retreat to the safety of the village, to the quiet destiny she had always accepted. But something stronger than fear tugged her forward. The moment she crossed the threshold of the cave, the air shifted. It felt heavier, colder, as though she had entered a world untouched by sunlight or time. Moisture clung to the walls like sweat, dripping steadily into small pools below. The faint echoes of distant water reverberated through the cave, each ripple painting a mental map in her mind. Lyra had learned to listen beyond the surface of sound, to feel shapes and movements through vibrations. But here, everything felt distorted, twisted, secretive. With each step, the earth vibrated with a heartbeat that did not belong to her. Slow, deep, powerful. A heartbeat sealed under layers of magic and sorrow. The cave seemed endless, and yet she felt she was being watched, not by eyes, but by memories carved into the stone. Memories of something once great, now reduced to chains and silence. Her hand brushed the wall as she walked, feeling indentations carved by claws or blades, marks of desperation long faded from the world above. She paused, fingers tracing the grooves, sensing the rage and agony imprinted there. This place had known suffering, not for a year or a decade, but for lifetimes. A soft hum pierced the air, faint like the distant ringing of a bell submerged under water. It pulsed in and out of her awareness. Lyra followed it, letting her intuition guide her deeper into the heart of the cave. The path grew narrower, forcing her to slide sideways, the stone walls pressing cold against her shoulders. The ceiling lowered, brushing strands of her hair, making her bow as though the cave demanded reverence. Then, without warning, the ground expanded into a vast chamber. She sensed it immediately, the openness, the stillness, the shift in temperature as cool air swirled around her. Her footsteps echoed differently here, bouncing back from walls too far away to reach. She froze, holding her breath, listening. There it was again, the metallic rattle, soft, weak, almost embarrassed by its own existence. Chains, heavy, immovable, ancient, and behind them, a presence. A presence that made her knees tremble and her heart stutter. She felt it like a wave, raw power, buried beneath exhaustion. Strength dulled by timeless imprisonment, yet still alive enough to reach out. She walked slowly, sensing the ground sloping downward. The chamber's floor was uneven, scattered with shards of broken stone and the remnants of long-dried blood. Lyra stepped carefully, her cane tapping ahead, each sound returning to her like an echo map. Then she felt something different beneath her fingertips, metal, but not ordinary metal. This was colder, alive with a faint hum, like a sleeping beast. Chains wrapped around the stone floor, coiled like serpents, leading inward toward the heart of the chamber. Lyra followed them forward until the air around her thickened with energy. The presence behind the chains stirred, She felt it rise before she heard it. The shifting of weight, the tightening of muscle, the faint brush of air displaced by movement. It towered, powerful yet weary, as though struggling to remember what strength meant. The voice came again, low, broken, yet carrying the echo of authority that once commanded armies. Without sight, Lyra saw him more clearly than any person with eyes could. His presence filled the space, massive, regal, scarred by decades of torment. She could feel the unevenness in his breath, the tremor beneath it, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. She raised her hand, trembling slightly, and moved her fingers along the chains. The metal throbbed under her touch, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Magic crawled along her skin, a dangerous, dark, old magic, designed not just to bind flesh, but to suppress spirit. Lyra felt the ancient enchantments pulse in rhythm with her own heart, a resonance that seemed to whisper that she was the key to breaking them. She inhaled deeply, letting the scent of iron, stone, and forgotten power fill her lungs, preparing herself for the moment when she would finally release the bound being. Lyra froze as the energy surged, testing her, tasting her. The enchantment wrapped around her like a cold fog, whispering warnings in a language older than the forest itself. It wanted her gone. It wanted her to run. But Lyra did not pull away. She pressed her hand more firmly against the chains. The enchantment flickered. The cold receded, confused by her persistence, by the purity of her intention. Lyra inhaled deeply, trying to understand what she felt. The magic was woven in layers: hatred, fear, power, and something like desperation. She sensed symbols etched invisibly into the metal, runes that twisted and shifted beneath her touch. They were not meant for mortal hands to interpret. But Lyra was no ordinary mortal. Her blindness had sharpened her senses into something beyond human. She felt things others could not: emotions, vibrations, the invisible dance of energy. She lowered herself, absent-mindedly pressing her palm to the ground. The earth beneath the chains vibrated sharply, like something thrashing deep below. She followed the vibration with her fingertips, tracing invisible lines that led to the shackled figure. And then she understood. The chains were not just holding him, they were draining him. The magic siphoned his strength each time he resisted, tightening its grip with every heartbeat, every breath, every memory of freedom. Lyra whispered softly, not a word, just a breath, and the cave responded. The energy around her softened, as though listening. It was impossible, yet she felt it. Her presence was changing something, breaking something. She moved closer, drawn irresistibly toward him. The air around him felt different, warmer, charged, alive in a way the rest of the cave was not. She sensed the faint tremor of exhaustion in his breaths, the subtle hitch that spoke of pain endured in silence. Her fingertips brushed something rough, skin, but not normal skin. It was warm despite the coldness of the cave, textured with scars, muscle, and a strength that no chain could fully suppress. Lyra jerked her hand back instinctively, startled by the closeness of him. She hadn't realized she had come so near, but he didn't move away. The presence leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, but with the desperation of someone who had not felt another living soul in decades. He exhaled, and the breath washed over her like the echo of a forgotten storm. Something ancient stirred in the depths of the cave. The runes on the chains glowed faintly. Magic shifted. Lyra's heart pounded as a dangerous realization dawned on her. Her presence was weakening the enchantment. She had no magic, no training, no knowledge of spells. And yet the chains responded to her touch, her breath, her heartbeat, because the enchantment had never encountered someone like her. Someone blind, someone intuitive, someone untouched by the illusions of sight, and therefore immune to the traps woven into the magic. The enchantment tightened suddenly, reacting aggressively. Lyra felt a sharp sting across her palm, forcing her backward. The ground trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The magical chains pulsed violently, angry, awakened. But the presence behind them did not retreat. He stood firm, his energy rising faintly as though her defiance gave him strength he had forgotten he possessed. Lyra steadied her breath, pushing her fear down. She felt the cave closing in around her, the weight of the darkness thickening, the magic coiling like a serpent preparing to strike. And yet she did not move. She could not move, because somewhere inside her, deeper than logic or fear or doubt, a truth echoed with clarity. She was meant to be here. The chains hummed again, lower now, almost questioning her. Lyra reached forward, slower this time, and let her fingers glide gently over the cold metal. The enchantment flickered again, uncertain, confused by her persistence and calm. The presence behind the chains shifted slightly, watching, waiting. Lyra inhaled deeply, feeling the magic swirl around her like a storm held at bay. Each breath felt heavier, each moment more dangerous. But she stayed. Because even though she didn't understand this magic, even though she didn't know who or what was chained, even though the cave throbbed with ancient danger, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. A chamber around Lyra trembled with a restless energy, as though the darkness itself breathed in anticipation. Slowly, the presence behind the chains stirred again, not violently, not with force, but with the heavy, aching weight of a being who had forgotten the meaning of movement. The air around him felt charged, almost electrical, as though centuries of suppressed power awakened at the faintest touch of hope. Lyra's senses sharpened. She could feel every subtle shift in the chamber, the ripple of energy moving along the stone floor, the faint tremor in the chains as tension traveled through them, the soft scrape of skin, thick, scarred, powerful, adjusting after years of stillness. Her heart pounded, yet she remained steady, anchored by a strange certainty she didn't fully understand. She stood still, letting her other senses paint the figure in her mind. He was enormous. The sheer aura of his presence filled every corner of the chamber. Not human, not fully. Something more. Something ancient. Something that radiated authority even now, buried beneath exhaustion and decay. She sensed his silhouette long before she felt his breath. His upper body towered, muscles forged from a past of battle and leadership. She felt the scars upon him without touching them, deep grooves across his arms, his chest, his back, wounds that spoke of wars long forgotten by the world above. His hair was long, heavy, weighted with years of neglect, hanging like a dark curtain across his face, and his hands, bound by chains thicker than her wrist, glowing faintly with runes that pulsed like dying embers, were the hands of a king, a warrior, a leader who had once commanded legions. She felt the authority in the air around him, an invisible crown pressed down by 35 years of forced silence. But beneath all of that, buried under layers of power, suffering, rage, and ancient magic, she sensed something else: loneliness. A loneliness so profound it felt like a living wound. A loneliness that echoed through the chamber like a ghost, clinging to the chains, woven into the stone. A loneliness that had been carved into him over decades of imprisonment, until it became part of his soul. Lyra's breath hitched. She did not know his name, his crimes, his history, but she felt the truth in every vibration that reached her body. This was no ordinary captive. This was someone the world had once feared and revered. The presence shifted again, very slightly, as though gathering the strength to stand more fully. The chains tightened in response, their runes igniting with a hostile glow. The magic wrapped around him like a predator guarding its prey, tightening at the slightest sign of defiance. He endured it without resistance. He had endured it for 35 years. Lyra moved closer, guided not by sight, but by the rhythm of the air flowing around him. Her fingers brushed the enchanted metal again, and the runes pulsed, not in anger this time, but in warning. The magic seemed to question her presence, confused by her calm, her blindness, her unyielding intuition. She could feel it probing her mind, searching for fear, for weakness. But fear did not drive her, not yet. Curiosity did, compassion did, something deeper did. She took a slow breath and let her hand rest fully on the metal. The chamber responded with a low, vibrating hum, the kind that made the stone under her feet tremble. It was not a threat. It was recognition, as though the magic itself acknowledged a truth neither of them understood. The figure behind the chains drew in a breath, sharp, ragged, carrying decades of silence. Lyra felt the faint shift of air as he leaned, or perhaps collapsed, slightly forward, his weight pressing against the restraints. She sensed the strain, the trembling tension between captivity and the instinct to move, to speak, to exist again. She could feel his heartbeat now, slow, heavy, far too faint for someone of his strength. 35 years had drained him, not just of power, but of will. The chains had fed on him, consumed him, suppressed every spark of the greatness he once wielded. And yet the core of him still burned, a small, stubborn ember that refused to die. Lyra focused on that ember, reaching out through the darkness with her own silent understanding. Her presence resonated with his in a way she could not explain, an instinctive recognition between two souls who had lived their lives underestimated, misunderstood, bound by limits imposed by others. Her hand moved closer to him, the air thickening as she approached. She felt the heat radiating from him, the raw strength that still simmered beneath the layers of enchantment. Her fingertips brushed the rough skin of his wrist, just a whisper of contact, and the entire chamber seemed to halt its breath. The enchantment surged, reacting violently, as though trying to sever the connection. A sharp crack of energy snapped through the air, jolting her backward. She stumbled, catching herself on the stone floor. Her palm burned, but not from injury, from the magic itself, from the ancient force that had recognized her as a threat, or as a key. The presence behind the chains grew restless. She could feel it like a storm brewing in the shadows. Not anger, not aggression. Something deeper, something almost protective. Lyra steadied herself, inhaling deeply. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but she refused to back away. Instead, she shifted closer again, letting her senses expand, mapping the entire chamber in her mind. She felt the chain's patterns, the looping runes, the anchors lodged deep into the stone, the pulse of magic that repressed him. She traced the energy backward, finding its source not in the metal, but in the air around it. It wasn't the chains holding him, it was the curse. An ancient spell woven not to imprison the body, but to suffocate the spirit. As Lyra touched the magic again, she sensed something hidden beneath it, a faint echo, a whisper of energy trapped deep inside the spell, the remnant of something once pure, now corrupted, something broken. She leaned closer, sweeping her hand along the chain, letting the enchantment unravel its nature to her. And as she did, she felt the truth. The spell was designed to respond to power, to aggression, to strength. It reacted violently to dominance, to force. But it had no defense against intuition, against softness, against someone who moved through the world in silence, without sight, without the arrogance of control. Her breath steadied, the pieces aligned in her mind like a constellation forming itself in darkness. She could break this, not with strength, not with magic she did not possess, but with the one thing the enchantment had never been designed to resist, a blind girl's touch, a soul untainted by fear or ambition. Her presence alone weakened the spell, just enough to shift something in the chains. She felt it, a faint shiver, the soft loosening, a tiny crack in the binding that had held for 35 years. The presence behind the chains tensed, as though sensing the change too. The chamber thrummed with new energy, dangerous, unstable, hopeful. Lyra took another slow, steady breath, grounding herself. This was no prisoner. This was the Alpha King, a legend whispered across centuries, a ruler whose power had reshaped kingdoms, a being whose strength had once rivaled the moon itself, until betrayal shackled him here, in a darkness meant to erase him from history. Lyra had stumbled upon a secret no mortal had discovered in generations, and now that she stood before him, small, blind, ordinary to the world, yet extraordinary in ways she does not yet understand, the destiny of both their lives began to shift. The cave responded, the chains trembled, the magic wavered. And deep within the shadows, the Alpha King whispered a truth she did not yet hear, but felt in her bones. Her arrival had awakened something. The darkness inside the chamber shifted the moment Lyra's fingertips brushed the faint crack she had unknowingly created in the ancient spell. It was subtle, so subtle that any ordinary person might have missed it entirely. But to Lyra, whose senses existed beyond sight, it was a seismic shift. The ripple traveled through the chains like a whisper through still water, and every link responded, vibrating with a note of uncertainty. It was the first time in 35 years that the enchantment recognized something stronger than itself. The air grew thicker, layered with tension so heavy it pressed against Lyra's ribs. She steadied her breath, though she felt something deep within her stir. An instinct she didn't remember learning, an intuition far older than her own years. The cavern didn't just contain the Alpha King. It contained memories, echoes of a kingdom that had once knelt before him, their loyalty carved into the earth itself. Those echoes began to awaken. Lyra felt the shift like a low, spiraling hum rising from the stone beneath her feet. The ground carried vibrations that were not from movement, but from remembrance, an ancient pulse that had gone dormant when the Alpha King fell into eternal captivity. Something woven into the foundation of the mountain recognized her touch, her presence, her breath. It stirred with a soft rumble, like a beast waking after centuries of slumber. She reached out again, her fingertips brushing the chain lightly. The magic recoiled in response, not with hostility, but with confusion. It did not understand her. It did not know how to categorize a soul that navigates the world through instinct rather than dominance. The Alpha King sensed it too. He didn't speak. He hadn't spoken in decades, but the shift in his presence was unmistakable. The dormant power within him pulsed weakly, as though responding to a call he had forgotten how to answer. Lyra couldn't see him, but she felt him. The tremor in his shoulders as he fought against the weight of exhaustion, the rustle of long hair shifting over his back. A distant throb of strength buried beneath the curse that consumed him. She felt the moment his attention fixed on her, not in fear, not in curiosity, but in recognition. Not of his identity, but of her significance. For the first time in 35 years, the Alpha King realized the spell had weakened, and it was because of her. Lyra stepped closer, feeling the vibrations intensify. Her palm hovered inches above his wrist, sensing the warmth of his skin radiating through the chains. The heat was faint, dulled by decades of suppression, but it carries the unmistakable signature of power once feared by nations. Her heart thudded, the rhythm echoing through the chamber like a soft drumbeat. She didn't know why she wasn't afraid. Any other wolf, any creature with sense, would have turned and run from an ancient alpha bound in a forgotten dungeon. Yet she felt a strange pull, as though her fate had been tied to his long before she was born. The air shifted again. This time it was not the magic reacting. It was the mountain. A low, groaning sound vibrated through the cavern walls. Dust fell from the ceiling in soft showers, drifting like silent snow. A tremor rolled outward from the center of the chamber, spreading through the mountain's hollow spine. Lyra felt the ground pulse. Once, twice, like a heartbeat returning to life after centuries of stillness. The mountain remembered the Alpha King's drone, and it senses that its long-imprisoned master had finally been touched by something capable of breaking his chains. Lyra's hand brushed the surface of the enchanted meadow again, and this time the spell did not lash out. Instead, it flickered, conflicted, weakened, as though trying to decide whether she is a threat or a release. The crack she had created earlier widened, but not physically. It deepened within the magic itself, in the tangled weave of runes that had held the Alpha King captive. Lyra sensed the gap, like a wound in the energy, a soft tear through which ancient power began to seep. She stepped closer until she could almost reach him. The warmth of his aura enveloped her like a ghost of the power he once wielded. Her breath mingled with his faint exhale, and for the first time, she sensed a flicker of emotion within him. Not fury, not despair, but something almost fragile. Curiosity. She pressed her palm firmly against the chain, letting her heartbeat merge with the steady thrum beneath the metal. The runes glowed again, but softer this time, their hostility fading into reluctant acceptance. As her fingers traced the crack in the magic, she felt the spell unravel one fragile strand at a time. A tension in the air deepened. The chamber felt alive, listening, waiting. The Alpha King's head lifted slightly, the slow, heavy motion of someone who had forgotten the meaning of strength. Froze in place. His aura pulsed, faint, struggling, but undeniably awakening. Lyra felt the energy shift, the chains loosened by the width of a breath. The spell trembled. Something ancient stirred. For one suspended moment, the world held its breath. The darkness seemed to bow, the mountains seemed to exhale, and the air around Lyra shimmered with the quiet hum of destiny aligning itself. She didn't know what she had awakened. She didn't know that touching the Alpha King had set into motion a chain of events older than the moon itself. Silence settled over the cavern, like a living creature, heavy, alert, listening. The air thickened with the weight of something ancient stirring, something that had slumbered too long and now resisted the memory of awakening. Lyra felt the change not with her eyes but with her skin, her breath, her bones. Every vibration in the stone beneath her feet whispered of danger and destiny. For a moment, she stood absolutely still. The Alpha King's presence pulsed faintly behind her, a pressure like heat glowing under ice. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't hostile, it was simply vast. A dormant power that filled the air even when suppressed. Something in the chains trembled, responding to him or to her, she couldn't tell. A crack she had unintentionally created in the spell began to pulse with a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing from the past. Lyra reached out again, fingertips lightly brushing the cold iron. She expected pain this time. She expected the magic to lash out, to defend itself. But the spell didn't fight her. It studied her. Across the chamber, the Alpha King let out a slow, strained breath. His voice was low and gravelly when he spoke, but this time it carried something beneath the exhaustion, a flicker of alertness. "What did you do?" The question wasn't an accusation. It was a realization. Lyra didn't know how to answer. "I'm not sure," she whispered. "I just felt something calling me. And when I touched it, it changed." The Alpha King's change rattled softly, the sound sharp in the cavern's stillness. "Nothing has changed these chains in 35 years. Lyra exhaled, her breath trembling. Maybe the chains didn't expect me. The Alpha King fell silent. His aura shifted, just slightly. Slow, calculated, like a beast raising its head after decades of defeat, testing whether it still had strength left. Lyra's hand slid over the engraved runes binding the chains. Each rune vibrated at a different frequency, forming a web of enchantments layered thick with ancient magic. She could feel them now. One humming low, like a distant drum. Another trembling fast, like a trapped heartbeat. Another cold, steady, like stone. But beneath all of that, She sensed something new, a weakness. The spell had lost its perfect rhythm. At her touch, the chains stirred again, this time not physically, but magically, their energy rippling around her hand like a creature waking. She felt its hesitation, its confusion, its ancient memory trying to recognize her. Then something shifted. A sound unlike anything in the cavern's long existence whispered through the chamber, a faint, thin metallic sigh. The chains loosened, not visibly, not physically, but spiritually, as though the spell itself remembered something it had tried to forget. Lyra felt the tremor through her palm. The chains remembered blood. Not hers, not the Alpha King's, but someone else's. Someone from long ago. A memory not hers slammed into her senses, not as sight, but as sensation. A battlefield drenched in rain. A crown falling into mud. A voice chanting a curse. Chains forged in moonlight. A figure screaming as magic sealed around him. Lyra gasped and stumbled back, pressing a hand to her chest, as the memory rushed through her like cold wind. She shook, breath unsteady. The Alpha King felt it too. "Tell me what you saw," he commanded softly. No aggression, just urgency woven into exhaustion. "I don't know," Lyra whispered. "It wasn't a vision. It was like the chains showed me a feeling." "They've never responded to anyone," he murmured. "Not even to me." Something heavy shifted inside the Alpha King's aura, recognition mixed with disbelief. He lifted his head slightly, and Lyra felt the weight of his gaze settle on her, even though she couldn't see it. "Who are you?" The question lingered in the darkness. Lyra opened her mouth, but no answer came. She didn't know. She was just a blind Omega girl living at the edge of the forest. Insignificant, powerless, overlooked. No one special, no one remarkable. But the chains disagreed. They reacted again, another low metallic hum that traveled through the cavern like distant thunder rolling under the earth. This time, the stones around them shuddered, dust falling in thin streams from the ceiling. Lyra lifted her face slightly. "The mountain. It's trembling." "It trembles only when old magic shifts, and old magic shifts only for one reason, because someone the magic recognizes is near." Lyra's pulse thudded loudly in her ears. The chains pulsed again, a cold wave of energy brushing across her palm, soft, curious, as though testing her identity. She felt her breath hitch when something deep inside the spell whispered against her senses. "Your blood carries an echo." Lyra stumbled backward, startled. I don't understand." The Alpha King's chains rattled sharply as he shifted, trying to sit upright. The movement sounded painful, strained, but determined. "Your presence," he said slowly, "is not normal. You broke a weave that has never been touched. You awakened something that should not awaken." His breath was jagged. "What are you carrying in your veins, girl?" Lyra shook her head, heart racing. "I don't know any magic. I'm not a warrior. I can't even shift." "You don't need sight or a wolf to carry a legacy," the Alpha King growled softly. "Some power sleeps in bloodlines that should have died centuries ago." Lyra's chest tightened. A cold fear crept up her spine. But so did something else, something electric. A strange familiarity. A faint tug inside her, like a thread being gently pulled. She turned back toward the chains, breath shaky. "If I keep touching it, will it hurt you?" "No." His voice was firm. "The chains cannot hurt me more than they already do." A pause. "But they might hurt you." Lyra hesitated. Then she stepped forward anyway, her palm pressed to the chain. This time the magic didn't recoil. It surged toward her, wrapping around her hand in a cold, swirling current that prickled across her skin. The runes glowed under her touch, humming louder and louder until the entire cavern vibrated. The Alpha King inhaled sharply. The spell began to unravel. The crack widened, and Lyra felt it, the tearing of ancient magic, screaming silently as its centuries-old structure began to weaken. It lashed out, not at her, but at itself, straining, fighting, trying to hold its own integrity. Her breath stuttered as raw energy pulsed through her veins. She tasted metal in her mouth. Her knees trembled. She could feel the chain's memory. Feel their creation, their fury, their purpose. And she felt something else. Something lurking beneath the spell. Something alive. Something watching her from within the magic, as though the chains themselves had a consciousness. It whispered again, "You carry her blood." Lyra's heart stopped for a beat. Her breath froze. A sharp, burning pain stabbed through her palm. The chains recognized her. Then, the rune beneath her hand exploded in a burst of cold. White energy. The cavern shook violently, the mountain rumbling as though waking from a 1,000-year sleep. Lyra was thrown backward, landing hard on the stone floor. The Alpha King roared, not in pain, but in shock as the chain on his right wrist snapped loose with a deafening clang. The spell had broken. One chain, one link, one step closer to freedom. Silence crashed down, heavy, breathless, world-shifting. Lyra lay on the ground, chest heaving, every muscle trembling from the energy that had ripped through her. The Alpha King stared. She felt the intensity of his gaze like heat in the darkness. "You." His voice was barely audible. Just broke what an army of sorcerers could not touch. A slow, pulsing vibration rippled through the ancient stone as though the mountain itself felt the shock of the broken chain. Dust fell in soft, whispering clouds. Cracks shivered across the walls. The air grew heavy, so heavy Lyra could feel its weight pressing against her chest. She pushed herself up with shaking hands, her palms raw from the burst of magic that had thrown her backward. Her breath trembled in the darkness. The energy still clung to her skin, cold, sharp, electric, like the lingering presence of something ancient that had touched her and was reluctant to leave. The chain lay on the ground beside the Alpha King, its spell-torn fragments glowing faintly like dying embers. The Alpha King, Eric, shifted with a sound that was almost unnatural. Not because he was frightening, but because the movement itself was unfamiliar to his body. 35 years bound in this same position had turned every motion into agony. But now one of his arms was free, and the cavern felt the change. Lyra sensed it immediately, a ripple of power, faint but unmistakable. Blooming from the freed limb, it was like standing near the first crack of lightning before a storm, charged, unpredictable, hungering. Eric inhaled slowly. The sound was harsh, too loud in the silence, too raw after decades of breathing under suppression. His lungs expanded like a beast taking its first breath after a lifetime of drowning. Then, the shadow moved. Lyra froze. She had no eyes, but her other senses were sharper than sight. And every instinct inside her screamed. Something else was in the cavern now. Not a person, not a creature, not even a spirit. A presence. The Alpha King's shadow. A fragment of his power. A remnant of the beast that had once dominated kingdoms and commanded armies with a single growl. It unfurled behind him like smoke, stretching across the stone floor with slow, deliberate motion. Lyra felt it brush over her skin, cold yet burning, familiar yet terrifying. It wasn't fully alive. It wasn't fully him. It was his suppressed aura, weakened and starved, finally slipping through the cracks of the broken spell. Eric stiffened. He could sense it too. My shadow. His voice came out hoarse, strained. It remembers freedom. Lyra's heartbeat staggered. She felt the shadow's curiosity sweep over her like a cold wind, sniffing, circling, studying. Not hostile, not gentle, simply aware of her, as though she had awakened it from a death-like sleep. Eric bowed his head slightly, breath trembling. I didn't think I would ever feel it again. Lyra swallowed. Her throat felt dry. Is it dangerous? The Alpha King hesitated, not because he didn't know the answer, but because he did. Yes, he whispered, and no. A shadow is a wolf's power stripped of its body. It cannot kill. It cannot fight. His voice dropped lower. But it can remember. Lyra's skin prickled. The shadow twisted again, stretching toward her like a silent question. Eric tensed. She felt the sudden shift in his aura, protective instinct flaring through exhaustion. Do not fear it, he murmured. His voice gentler now. It reacts to strength, to courage, to blood. Lyra inhaled sharply. There it was again. Blood. The word that tied her fate to the chains. The word the magic whispered before exploding. A word she didn't understand, but felt sinking deeper into her bones with every passing second. Her blood carried something the mountain recognized, something the spell feared. The shadow inched closer. Lyra did not move. She stayed still, scared but steady, her heart pounding loud enough that even the stone might hear it. The cold whisper brushed her fingertips, and she felt a strange pull, like her own energy reaching out to meet it. Then, the shadow bowed. A low, rippling gesture of acknowledgement. Lyra's breathing hitched. Why? Why did it do that? Eric's answer was a quiet thunder. Because it knows you. Lyra froze. How? I've never been here. I've never met you. You haven't, Eric said, but your blood has. Lyra's head spun. I don't understand. You will, he murmured, when the second chain breaks. Lyra stepped back instinctively. Pulse racing. I don't want to break anything else, not until I know what I'm doing. You don't need to know, Eric murmured. Magic is not guided by knowledge. It is guided by truth. Lyra clenched her hands. Then what truth is in me? The Alpha King fell silent. A long, heavy silence. The kind that hides answers sharp enough to cut. Lyra waited, breath trembling. Finally, Eric spoke. There was someone, he said slowly, voice thick with memory. The one who forged these chains. The one who cursed me. His tone hardened. The one who betrayed the throne. Lyra's heart thudded painfully. She was a blind sorceress. Lyra's breath stopped. She lived 3 centuries ago, feared by all. Impossible to kill. She was the only one who could twist the mountain's magic, and the only one whose blood could ever unmake her spells. Lyra's knees weakened. No, that couldn't be. Eric lifted his free hand. She could feel the tremor of power under his skin, faint but awakening. You carry her blood. The cavern's air grew heavy, crushingly heavy. Lyra shook her head, whispering, "That's impossible." "Impossible," Eric echoed, "yet true." A shadow shifted behind him, larger now, bolder, no longer starved, but feeding on the crack in the spell. Lyra felt something cold slide into her chest. Not fear, recognition. The same strange pull she had felt since the moment she stepped into the forest. The invisible hand that guided her here, the whisper in her bloodline she never knew existed. Eric's next words shattered the silence like a blade cutting stone. "You are a descendant of the sorceress who caged me." Lyra stumbled backward. "But she's been dead for centuries." "Yes," Eric murmured, "but blood does not die. Blood remembers." Lyra pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Her heartbeat echoed through the cavern, and the mountain echoed back, soft, deep, awakening. The shadow behind Eric lifted its head, its form expanding, swirling like a beast smelling the scent of destiny after centuries of waiting. Lyra whispered, barely audible, "Why would my blood bring me here?" Eric's chains rattled softly as he turned toward her fully for the first time. His answer came like a prophecy fulfilled. "Because only her blood can free me." A pause, a breath, a heartbeat, and only her blood can destroy me. Lyra's world cracked open, and in the darkness, destiny watched. The cavern's darkness was no longer empty. It throbbed with presence. 2 powerful forces entwined in silence, and a third, intangible one weaving its thread through the air. Lyra felt it as if the entire mountain itself was alive, listening, testing, and trembling under the weight of what had been unleashed. The broken chain lay on the stone floor, its fragments glowing faintly like dying embers, and the sound of metal resonating through the cavern had not yet faded. The Alpha King, Eric, moved with difficulty. The freed arm, a heavy, clumsy extension of a body that had forgotten motion. But he was moving, and the mountain acknowledged it. Every shuddering step he took caused the shadows to ripple, and every vibration pressed against Lyra's senses in waves. As though the earth itself had been holding its breath for centuries and had only now begun to exhale. Lyra's hand hovered over the remaining chains, instinctively drawn to the magic that had already begun to unravel. She could feel it pulsing beneath her palm, faintly now, unevenly, like a heartbeat trying to resume after decades of suppression. Her skin tingled as if the air itself contained whispers, calling her forward. Calling her to touch, to awaken him fully. The Alpha King's gaze fixed on her, intense, almost painfully so. She felt it like heat radiating through the cavern. His aura had shifted from dormant to tentative awareness. A faint flicker of raw power beneath layers of exhaustion and suppressed strength. He was no longer just a figure chained in darkness. He was becoming something else, something ancient, dangerous, alive. She stepped closer to the first chain. The fragments lay scattered like relics, but her fingers traced the faint energy that hummed between them. She had no knowledge of spells, no mastery over magic. But instinctively she understood the rhythm, the pulse, the subtle melody of the enchantment. It reacted to her touch in the most impossible way. It recognized her blood. It feared her intent. And most importantly, it obeyed. Her breath hitched as the faintest spark traveled up her arm. The cavern seemed to respond, the stone walls quivering, shadows dancing, the cool air thickening as if charged with invisible electricity. The shadow behind Eric stirred. It stretched, undulating like smoke, larger, stronger, aware of the crack in the magic, aware of her presence, aware of what she carried in her veins. Lyra pressed her palm fully against the chain. The cold stung her skin, but she did not flinch. She could feel the metal responding, pulsing under her fingertips, as though alive. The runes carved into it began to flicker, faint lines of light snaking across the chain, as though awakening from a long sleep. The vibration intensified, running along the metal, through the stone, through the cavern, and into Eric. He tensed, the freed arm lifting slightly as the pulse of energy reached him. The shadow behind him roared softly. A soundless echo, vibrating against the walls, aware of the surge, aware of the breaking of the first barrier. Eric's chest heaved, breath sharp, rapid yet purposeful. He was moving, awakening, remembering, but still tethered, still bound by the remaining chains and the remnants of centuries-old magic. Lyra's heartbeat matched the rhythm of the chain, and suddenly it clicked into place. A resonance she could feel deep in her chest. Her bloodline, the hidden echo of a long-dead sorceress, had been waiting for this moment. The chain shivered violently, responding to the recognition. The air in the chamber thickened, charged with anticipation. Shadows stretched and twisted. The walls groaned. A violent pulse of energy surged from Lyra's hand, and the chain rattled, bucking against its restraints. Magic, ancient and furious, attempted to defend itself. But it was confused, destabilized, vulnerable. The Alpha King's shadow writhed behind him, reacting to the disturbance, not with attack, but with acknowledgement. It recognized her blood, recognized her intent, recognized the moment destiny had chosen. Lyra felt it, the exact moment the magic realized it could not hold. With a deafening clatter, the second link of the first chain snapped, metal falling in jagged shards across the stone floor. Energy pulsed violently through the cavern, almost knocking Lyra off her feet. She clung to the remaining chain for balance, breath ragged, senses overwhelmed by the surge of power. The Alpha King roared. Half pain, half triumph. The sound reverberated through the cavern, shaking dust from the ceiling, rippling across walls, echoing back to them like thunder from a